And we thank you for joining us today for our One South Coast Chamber Human Resource Council webinar. If you have any questions at any time during the presentation, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. So Tom Perreira is the Executive Director of the MassHire Bristol Workforce Board, a private sector-led board of education, business, labor, and community-based organization executives responsible for policy and oversight of the region's public workforce development system. Tom coordinates the board's activities, including the development of the Regional Workforce Development Business Plan, convening regional partnerships to develop and implement workforce development initiatives, and ensuring quality services to area employers and job seekers. Tom has more than 30 years of workforce development experience, and prior to his service as executive director, he served as director of planning for the Workforce Board and assistant planning, I'll get it right, an assistant planner for the Bristol County Training Consortium, with responsibility for oversight of government-funded workforce development contracts. Tom began his career in workforce development as an assessment counselor at the Fall River Career Center, helping economically disadvantaged adults, dislocated workers, and at-risk youth access education, training, and employment opportunities. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you to everyone for attending today, taking time out of your day, and thanks to the One South Coast Chamber and the Human Resource Council, and I go way back. I can remember the early days of the Human Resource Council and attending meetings way back when. So it's great to be here, and I'm going to take a minute to share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see that.
Yes.
Okay.
Tom, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So today's goal is to identify ways to address your workforce issues. So we look at basically 4 questions here. I mean, that we find that a lot of companies are having difficulty with. Are you trying to hire workers? Are you having difficulty doing that? Maybe you are finding some workers, but you can't find those with the right skills. Are you looking for skilled workers? And then when you look at a longer term, you know, obviously there are some labor market shortages now. Would you like to see a more systemic talent pipeline development and participate in that in your particular industry? Maybe another way to deal with some of your workforce skills issue is to upgrade the skills of your current workforce. So if in fact you might answer yes to any one of those 4 questions, then I'm happy to say that there are programs and services available through the Massachusetts Public Workforce Development System that can benefit your company. About us, as Mike briefly mentioned there, the MassHire Bristol Workforce Board is one of 16 workforce boards throughout Massachusetts, and we're charged with overseeing and coordinating and implementing workforce development initiatives in the greater Fall River, Attleboro, and Taunton areas. There are other boards, and I'm going to, in the next slide, you'll see that. And I believe Deb Megason from the New Bedford WIB is on the call. So there are boards around the Southeast. So fret not if you don't fall into Fall River, Attleboro, or Taunton, because all these services I mentioned to you are available through any board or career center in the Commonwealth. The MassHire programs and services are funded in part by the U.S. Department of Labor, the Employment and Training Administration, as well as other federal and state funding streams. I mean, the big relevance to that is because we are publicly funded, all the services that I described to you and the assistance that we can provide you in accessing them are at no cost to Massachusetts businesses. So I mentioned, so the Southeast region, and we're called Region 6 by the state, and it incorporates 4 workforce development boards. And you can see there Greater New Bedford, which incorporates the Greater New Bedford area, Bristol, which again incorporates Greater Fall River, Taunton, and Attleboro, Greater Brockton, which is Brockton and surrounding towns, and then South Shore, which runs from the Quincy area down along the coast to Plymouth. So again, if there may be instances in terms of any follow-up we do that any one of these boards may be able to assist you. And I would also note that any board in the state. So if you had a location outside the Southeast, certainly you can access assistance from other boards as well. Okay, so the first thing is, how do you find employees now? What assistance can we provide in that regard? Well, primarily through that, the MassHire Career Centers are the flagship products of the board in terms of providing direct assistance to employers. And you can see some of the services that are provided here. And again, remember, these are at no cost to Massachusetts employers. You'd have access to professional account representatives and account management services. So this includes posting your job orders, referral of qualified applicants to job openings and internet listings. Now, remember, we have a whole pool of individuals who are searching for employment. In fact, anyone who collects unemployment assistance are generally required to access the Career Center and its services, go to Career Center seminars, do our workshops, and so forth. So again, there is a talent bank. Recruitment services are conducted by all centers. Both employers and specific Career Center hosting events are responsible for marketing and outreach. So customized recruitment we can do for any employer. And staffing resources will be shared among the Career Centers. And by that, we mean that if you were to actually initiate access to the talent bank, say at the floor of a Career Center, you would also have access to all the Career Centers in the state. And that would include, say, the New Bedford Career Center, the Brockton Career Center, and so forth. Initial pre-screening of applicants prior to referral, we can do that as well. So as we get in resumes for any job posting you have, some employers would like to see all the resumes, but other employers don't want to go through 100 resumes, of which many will not necessarily meet the qualifications of your job. So we would be able to, in fact, pre-screen those applicants at the Career Center to make sure that you're only seeing applicants that really meet the qualifications. We can provide labor market information on applicant pool, qualifications of potential applicants. So you might be interested to know labor market information. What might that entail? Well, maybe you want to know what the average wages are of the positions that are being posted throughout the state and indeed in the Southeast section. Maybe you want to know how many unemployment insurance claimants who were employed in your industry prior to layoff. It's that sort of thing. Access to the talent bank. Again, we have a large talent bank of individuals looking for work, and there are ways that we can mine that talent bank to match some of your job specifications. And we do things like job title searches. So we can actually search the talent bank to see people who are in our region collecting unemployment who had a job title that's similar to one that you're seeking right now. Information on local availability of training grants, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move forward. But all the grants that are available, if you're utilizing the Career Center for hiring assistance, they can also inform you of grants that are available, such as tax credits and other training grants. Information on employment insurance. Obviously, a lot of employers have questions about their rights, responsibilities under UI, so representatives of the Career Center can help you with that. Information on tax credits. We'll talk a little bit about that toward the end. Based on individuals you hire, you may be eligible for a tax credit. And the thing is, you may be hiring people that fall into these categories and you're not even aware of it. So we want to make sure that you get access to those tax credits. Testing and assessment of job candidates. There are employers whom you might have an assessment test that you utilize. The Career Center can administer those for potential applicants as well. And use of space. If you want to do recruitments and you have space issues, we can do them on site at the Career Center. Also, job fairs, we do those semi-regularly, and I know we participate in one of the SouthCoast Chamber we'll be doing in September, but we also do others that are done virtually and also specifically by industry. There'll be a veterans job fair in November, for example. So certainly, if you're connected to the Career Center, you would get information on all the job fairs that would be coming up that you could participate in. So where are the MassHire Career Centers in Southeastern Mass? And I've got the the website addresses up there. I'll leave those up for a minute. Under MassHire Bristol, we oversee the Fall River, Taunton, and Attleboro Career Centers. MassHire New Bedford has the New Bedford Career Center. There's a career center in Brockton, one in Quincy. And I threw on there, just in case, I know some of you folks might be from the far east of the One South Coast Chamber catchment area. And there's also a MassHire Cape and Islands Career Center out in Hyannis. So, and again, I will give this PowerPoint to Katie, and we were talking before, and we'll get this PowerPoint out to everybody who's attended today. So that's the easiest way, is just to go to those websites. That'll give you the address, the contact information. Okay, so next, look to the talent pipeline. I mean, there is, how do we develop a talent pipeline for your particular industry? You might not know, but there are, in fact, trainings going on right now. And some of those may fit job categories that you're looking for. And we have graduates coming out of those training programs that you may want to interview, may want to access. So the state has engaged, particularly with ARPA money, because there is some additional funding, in a concept called Future Skills. And there are 3 main grants under the Future Skills that employers can participate in. There's the Career Technical Initiative, the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund, and Replenishing Employer Investment in Education and Workforce, better known as RENEW. The CTI, and I'll go into detail on each of these in future slides, but just in a brief overview, the CTI grant pairs employers with the vocational technical schools to train new workers in jobs in high-demand industries. The Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund supports partnerships between employers and training providers to create training programs that, and you can see there's funding of up to $500,000 for those programs. The RENEW is it partners employers with local training providers to develop diverse and equitable workforce. So the RENEW program is like any individual employer can start that. The difference, Workforce Competitiveness requires a partnership of at least 2 employers. RENEW, and how that works is you establish a training program that's paid for through this grant for skills that you're requiring. If, in fact, you hire an individual out of the RENEW grant, then you would pay back into the system half of their training cost. But we'll get into a little bit more detail. The Career Technical Initiative, the Career Technical is basically, in its concept, transform vocational high schools, tackle skill gaps in construction, trades, and manufacturing. So again, CTI tends to be centered on construction, trades, and manufacturing. Provide skills training for underemployed adults, prioritizes diverse populations, and plans to train 20,000 new skilled workers in those fields. So the way CTI works basically is there are a target list of occupations, and it looks to establish training programs to support and underemployed workers. It allows for up to $6,000 per student, and it emphasizes sustainable employer training partnerships. So what ends up happening here, by and large, is now vocational technical schools and Chapter 74 schools in the state have a number of vocational training options. So we go to Diamond or Greater New Bedford Voc or Bristol, Plymouth, and Taunton. They have various vocational technical programs training high school students in things like machining and welding and construction trades. However, what happens is after hours, those programs, the schools are basically, the shops are basically not being utilized. So what this grant does is it allows for training, the vocational schools to apply for training and do training for adults, unemployed adults, after hours. And there are several that are going on right now. There are more applications coming in. What do you as an employer, how does this benefit you potentially? You can partner in these grants with the Voc schools. What they look for from you is to inform them of the curriculum, to ensure that the training programs are meeting your requirements. And then what ends up happening is at the end of the program, when you have graduates, you basically have first crack at hiring graduates of the training program. So again, a talent pipeline development, ways in which you can help establish talent pipeline programs where you see a need. The Workforce Competitors Trust Fund is a bit similar, but its training can actually incorporate a much wider scope than just the vocational training programs. It also offers training to a larger number of industries. And as you see, open to a variety of sectors and occupation, focuses on low-income populations who are unemployed, supplies grant value for high throughout programs, so up to $500,000 for a single grant. So it's got a pretty large grant availability. Sustainable employment and training partnerships, flexible funding, and available to a broad range of training providers, institutions, and employers. So here we are again. You could establish a training program that you can partner an establishment of a training program in partnership with a training provider to train unemployed adults to help develop a talent pipeline. We've done a number of these in the past. We did one in welding in partnership with some manufacturing employers, in partnership with the Brockton Board. We did one in CDL, commercial driver's license, and diesel mechanic. We've also done them in CNC machining. So there are a number of different occupations that training programs be established. If you would be interested in talent pipeline training, then certainly let us know, because if we have enough employers grouped together who show the demand, then certainly we go for a grant. That's another important thing to note is you may look at it as an individual employer and saying, geez, such a grant is too big for me. I don't have that. I'm not a large employer, and I'm not going to be able to hire that many people out of a training program at one time. But even if you had a need for just one or two employees in a particular high-skilled category, we can group together employers. I might have 3 or 4 other employers who have the same need, and we could develop a partnership grant. And then again, what happens is once these individuals graduate from the training, you would basically get first crack at interviewing and hiring. The Renew grant, again, a very similar concept. The difference is that you could do it on your own as one employer and not have to partner with others. And what it does is, again, establishes training programs. The difference here is because it's all really to the benefit of the individual employer that has a number of openings. What ends up happening is if, in fact, you hire someone out of the training and they retain an employment, then you would pay back into the fund half the cost of that person's training. So let's say it was a $10,000 training program. There were 10 people in it, $1,000 a piece. If you hire the person, then you pay $500 back into the fund. Again, similar concept in establishing customized pipeline training programs that could form a new source of employees for your company. Other grants in terms of the talent pipeline I'll just run through quickly: specialized regional training, apprenticeship, on-the-job training, and internship opportunities. There are regional grants that the 4 boards I listed have partnered in. And right now, there are trainings going on in a hub healthcare grant and behavioral healthcare grants and advanced manufacturing, welding, CNC machining, CDL training I mentioned. So the point is that there are regional grants going on right now that the boards are overseeing that they will be graduates coming out of, certified nurses aid, welders, and so forth, CDL drivers. So it's useful to connect to your boards just to know what trainings are happening and where there are qualified and trained individuals coming out that are looking for work, potentially in your industry. Apprenticeships. Registered apprenticeship is an industry-driven, high-quality career pathway where employers can develop and prepare their future workforce, and individuals can obtain paid work experience, receive wage increases, classroom instruction, and credentials. Now, apprenticeship, a lot of people think of as the construction trades, and that, of course, was the traditional apprenticeship. But apprenticeships now have expanded to all sorts of industries, and there are hundreds of apprenticeship roles and job titles that are already approved. How it works is that this apprenticeship is you're looking to hire a new position. You recruit a new person. Now, this is before they're hired, or the Career Center can actually recruit as well. And once that person's hired, they're on the job, you're paying them, but they're actually engaging in training while they're on the job. But the difference is, so the training is being paid for out of the grant, but you're paying the individual for their work and while they're in training. So it's a model that in which people are basically being trained in some sort of program, and we develop a skill set and training for them while they're on the job. On the job training is similar. It is a little bit different, but OJT is a federal program funded by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and it lets you train workers and get reimbursed for your efforts. So how this works is that you as an employer, if you're looking for someone in a job with a certain number of skill sets and you can't seem to find the right person, then and you're willing to take a chance on someone who maybe has half the skill set you're looking for, but you know there's going to be investment in time and training to get them the other half of those skill sets. And so you're reluctant to hire because of the amount of time and effort it's going to take and resources it's going to take to train that person up to meet all the requirements. So how this works is that we want you to hire that person, so we'll support you in that regard. And generally how it works is we develop a training plan. So we look and see what the skill sets of the job are. We then assess the person, find out how much of the skill sets they have, and then we develop a training plan saying, okay, we need X number of hours, say 300 hours over 3 months or over 6 months. And during that period of time, you, the employer, receive 50% of subsidized of their wage. So what we do basically is during that training period, while they're being trained on the job at your facility by your employees, we will reimburse you for 50% of their wage during that period of time. Again, it's a way for you to potentially look at a job that you've got a number of skill sets that you're having difficulty finding someone. We might be able to identify someone who has some of those skill sets. And you're willing to take a chance. Hey, let's hire that person because I'll have support to be able to train them and get them upskilled on the skill sets in my job that I don't necessarily see them having. Work experience internships. There's a program called YouthWorks that all the boards run, and it's a state-funded youth employment program that helps teens and young adults develop the skills and experience needed to find and keep jobs. Participants take part in paid short-term work placements during the summer and or the school year, and up to the age of 25. So if you would like an intern, and we want to match a youth with a paid work experience, this might be a program for you that we could place a youth at your work site for a certain period of time, and we pay the wage. So you basically get an intern, a paid internship paid for out of the YouthWorks grant. And your role in that would obviously be providing a work and learning experience for that youth and helping us track their skill gains and so forth. So again, if you kind of thought of the idea of, gee, I'd like to get an intern, but I'm not quite sure how, and don't have the money necessarily to fund an intern, this is a way in which you might be able to have that need met. Another way is to, we've talked about hiring now. We talked about looking at a talent pipeline potentially as a means of getting employees. This final part really is to upgrade your current employee skills. I mean, if you're having a difficulty filling certain positions, it may be that your current employees could meet those needs. The primary way to do that in Massachusetts right now is the Workforce Training Fund program. And it addresses business productivity and competitiveness by providing resources to Massachusetts businesses to fund training for current and newly hired employees. So these would be your current employees. They could have been hired yesterday, and they would be eligible to participate in the training. It's for businesses of all sizes, but its major focus is small to medium-sized businesses, and to help you make an investment in your employee skills and your future. We offer 2 types of grants to support the training needs of businesses across the state. The Workforce Training Fund General Program is a kind of a large-scale 2-year training project, which develops strategic and customized training. Any basic training that you might want to do at your company is fair game. There's a maximum award of $200,000 over a 2-year grant period. Businesses of any size can apply with a customized training plan. And you could do all sorts of different types of training that are very different. You could have 10 or 15 different training modules that are in different categories. There is a $1 to $1 match, but generally how that works is if you're doing a training program during the employee's working hours, you're paying them while they're in training. And that's almost in most cases, the match is met by the money you're paying the employee while they're participating in training. This also is, again, I go back to the point I made before. You might say, well, it doesn't have to be 200,000. It can be much less. But you might say, I'd like to do a customized training program, but I don't have a lot of employees that might need it. Boards can lead consortium grants, meaning that we might find 3 or 4 different employers that have a similar training need. You as an employer send 2 or 3 people, another employer send 2 or 3 people, and before you're done, you have a class of 15, for example. But again, this is a great program in that you can basically customize you pick your own training provider, you customize the training, and there's money there for it. And I'll give some examples in a minute. The Express program, that's the second part of the Workforce Training Fund program, is streamlined access for smaller scale training. So you can access $20,000 maximum a calendar year. And if you have 100 or fewer employees, you're eligible up to 100% reimbursement for training costs. Full reimbursement up to $3,000 per person per course. And how that works is, so let's say this is like a 1-to-1 basis almost, and you might say, gee, I have a couple of employees I want to send to Excel training. Well, this is an opportunity to have part of that, or potentially 50 to 100% of the cost paid for by sending an individual. You can send them to any training provider, Bristol Community College, whatever, for shorter term individual training programs. And so my point here would be that if you were considering individual coursework for any of your employees, you really should investigate this, because why pay for the whole thing if there is funding available to support your efforts? And we can work with you to see if what you're looking at really is eligible. There's a current list of already approved individual programs, but even if it's not, even what you're looking at is not on the list, we can get it on the list. So again, in any instance in which you're looking at individual smaller scale training for an individual or a couple of people in your company, certainly this is something you would want to investigate. So the Workforce Training Fund, this is only a small sample of the types of trainings that have been made available through the Workforce Training Fund. So some companies have done, English for speakers of other languages. Now, you might not even think of that, but if you have employees with limited English skills that you want to upgrade, that's a possibility. Lean process improvement, particularly in manufacturing, Six Sigma, adult basic ed, productivity skills, customer service, project management, sales training, specialized sales training, computer numeric controlled machining, leadership and management skills, which cuts across all industry clusters. So, and this is, again, a very small example of the types of training that you can access funding for, up to $200,000 under the general program and up to $20,000 under the Express program. So again, if you have been giving any thought to training your existing incumbent workforce, before you take those steps, it's absolutely worth talking to us and seeing if the Workforce Training Fund program might be a way to support you financially. The applications are rolling, so you can basically apply. There's no specific deadline. You can apply at any time. And I'll just conclude with just one other service, and that is the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, and better known as WOTC. And that's a federal income tax credit incentive provided to businesses. An employer may be eligible for WOTC when they hire and retain veterans and individuals from other target groups with significant barriers to employment. The WOTC tax credit is a one-time tax credit for each new hire. So the concept here is, again, we're talking about individuals, which are in the last paragraph, that are in somewhat higher risk barrier to employment groups. We want to incentivize employers to take a chance and hire these individuals. Many of them have been great workers. We've worked with them at the career centers and can provide another source of employees, particularly in time of labor market shortage. And how much you get in the tax credit depends on the target group, the wages that they're being paid, the amount of, the hours that they're working. So you can get tax credits of $1,200 up to $9,600. So potentially almost $10,000 in tax credits for one employee is a pretty good benefit. So the target groups include veterans, recipients of TANF, recipients of food stamps, designated community residents living in empowerment zones, rural renewal counties, vocational rehabilitation referrals from an organization like Mass Rehab, ex-felons, supplemental security income recipients, summer youth employees, etc. So there are and qualified long-term unemployed. Now, the thing is, I would gather if I were to guess, I think of all the businesses on this call that somebody has probably hired one or more individuals from one of these categories and may not even know it. And therefore you're kind of missing out on a tax credit. That's one of the advantages of also working with the Career Center is if you're looking at an individual who's in one of these categories, we would know about it. We would be able to advise you with that, and the Career Center can also assist you in filling out the forms that would be necessary to claim the tax credit. So again, we look at it as a benefit that I think is pretty underutilized in many cases, because I think employers are hiring some of these individuals in these categories and just aren't aware that they can get may not even aware that they're in the category, or may not be aware that they can get a tax credit for it. All right, so I've thrown quite a bit of information at you, and I think, and this is my contact information, please feel free to reach out to me. Even if you're in another region, I can certainly connect you with the right person based on what your needs are. Now, understand, I'm not in our initial conversation with you, it's not going to be that we're trying to sell you a grant. We want to make sure that you are connected to services that really meet your workforce needs. So our approach is, let's talk about what your workforce needs are, what your challenges in meeting those are. Is it incumbent worker skills? Is it finding new workers at entry level? Is it finding new workers with higher skill sets? Through that discussion, we then, and that's part of our role, because all those grants I listed, for you to try to go in there, I don't want to, and find the right match for you. I applaud you if you do that, but I would say this is that we know these grants and can make it a lot easier for you. We can connect you to the right grants. We can connect you to the right services to make sure, again, that your workforce needs are met. So I will stop there, and I will stop my share as well, and I'll put my video back on.
Tom, thank you. I know I plugged a few questions in as you were talking. And your last comments, I think, helped answer my first question, because my first question was, how much flexibility on the employer side is there when applying for grants to create training programs? And I think you pretty much just answered that, but if you want to comment on it a little more, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, one of the advantages of a number of these grants is there is a lot of flexibility. The Workforce Training Fund in particular is very flexible in how you want to schedule the training and so forth. The others, it's really about the talent pipeline grants are about really what the skill sets that your company is really looking for. And we can structure training in any way, because we're not like a college where we're saying you have to meet certain requirements in academia and so forth. In our case, we can basically develop, our CNC machinist program was specifically, the curriculum was developed based on manufacturing employer feedback and what they wanted to see.
Yeah, which is important, because the employers need to be able to fill the work that needs to be done. Tom, where does cybersecurity fall in all this? That's kind of a hot job area, but I didn't hear anything about.
Yeah, I mean, so there could be, again, so cybersecurity is an interesting one, is because it's more of a grant, it's more of an occupation that cuts across multiple industry clusters. It's like if you get a certified nurse's aide, yeah, it falls into healthcare. Cybersecurity, actually, there have been different training programs that have been done through that. We did one in partnership with New Bedford for young adults with Bristol Community College a few years back, a cybersecurity training program. And any one of those, I mean, I would say that it could certainly fit into a workforce training fund grant, and we can certainly, if there's enough, if we had enough demand, we could certainly look at cybersecurity under the Workforce Competitive Trust Fund, for example. It's not really it's CTI. It doesn't match completely because the Voc schools, it's not really one of their typical Voc shops, but that's where we get into flexibility, where the Workforce Competitive Trust Fund or the Renew grant, we could establish cybersecurity if there was sufficient employer demand. We always work backwards, and that's why it's important for employers to provide a feedback back. We tend, when we're looking to develop training programs, we don't want to develop training programs under these grants in which there's not going to be jobs at the end. But if we have enough employer feedback to say, yes, I would need this type, I have this need, and I'm going to continue to have it, and we have enough employers that say that, then we're absolutely willing to go all in and really support those types of training applications.
So in the WTF, what qualifies a business as small or medium? You kind of talked about there's small, there's medium.
Yeah, it's a pretty. I think most businesses we deal with are going to be considered small or medium because generally 100 is the cutoff.
Okay.
So small and medium business would be under that, and in fact, whereas in the Express Workforce Training Express program, that is the cutoff too. That's only available to businesses that are 100 or less, but the general fund is for any size.
So, would College Lead qualify for a workforce training grant? And if you need more on what College Lead is, I'll let Donna Criscola answer that.
Yes, tell me more about College Lead.
So it's an overview of opportunity to create a career path for our college students. We're focusing on sophomores and juniors. We're working with UMass, Bridgewater, and Bristol Community College, and 4 hiring organizations. And we're bringing them in, giving them soft skills, preparing the students to accept an internship. At the end of the program, they get a internship paid for by one of the hiring organizations. But it's a deep dive into career opportunity and career paths on the South Coast. It's an attempt to retain our educated talent and youth and emerging professionals, and to create a pipeline from college to South Coast hiring organizations.
Yeah, I mean, at first, based on that, that brief description, I would say that it's probably not a workforce training fund grant, but there are other. I would say that could be something that could potentially connect into WIOA Workforce Innovation Opportunity Youth Funding, as well as connecting at stat. I could see that being somehow integrated with connecting activities. That's state funding we receive for career exploration and such for young adults. So I'd be happy to have a follow-up conversation.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for you. So yeah, I have your contact information, Tom. It's good to see you. It's been a while, but I'll be reaching out.
Yeah.
Sounds good. So Tom, what qualifies a training institution to partner with workforce development to offer training?
Yeah, pretty much. It's a very wide range. They would generally fall into several categories. One would be obviously post-secondary would be automatically qualified. So any community or four-year college post-secondary institution. Also, if you are a private proprietary school licensed by Massachusetts or Rhode Island or New Hampshire, we work with them as well. So again, you have to be a licensed proprietary school. That would be another category. Then the other category are any Chapter 74 schools, such as Voc School, like Diamond, BP, Greater New Bedford Voc, Old Colony, and so forth. So that's the primary focus. You can't just kind of be a. Also, there are a number of professional training organizations that train under the Workforce Training Fund as well. So an example of those might be the Massachusetts Manufacturing Extension Partnership. So yeah, it's a pretty wide range. As long as you have some sort of professional recognition, then we can work with the training provider, get them on the approved lists.
So would an organization like Rob Roy Academy be appropriate for that?
Yeah, Rob Roy Academy is in fact a licensed private proprietary school.
Perfect.
They actually are on the, I believe they're on the what we call the ELTP, eligible training provider list. So yeah,
it might be a little outside of this conversation, so I might have to email this with you separately. But I remember when there was a time where there was a Section 30 grant. Is that so? We partnered with Workforce Development, but the students that wanted to come here with a Section 30 grant, they weren't allowed to. We weren't qualified in that sense. So I guess that's a little confusing.
Yeah, I mean, Section 30, I won't get into the extreme detail, but basically in very basic terms, Section 30 is if you are collecting unemployment insurance, you are required to do job search. You can substitute. So if you're Section 30 approved, you can substitute occupational training for the job search.
Right.
We can have a follow-up conversation. I'd be interested to know if I'll take a look at your listing on our individual training account list, and I can look at that Section 30 notes to see if there's some reason. Because if there's something that's preventing you from being approved, then let's work on that.
Yeah, I think it was, not to get too far into, I mean, we have a placement rate of almost 74%, but it still didn't meet the requirements of Section 30 based on how they looked at our information. Because I think they were calculating in any student that actually dropped from our program. Like they should be working even though they didn't graduate and get a state license.
Okay, yeah. And then the other requirement, and the other requirement Section 30 is they've got to be participating at least 20 hours a week. So I don't know if you're.
Oh yeah, we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. I'm more than happy to talk to you about that.
Okay, great.
Does anybody have any other additional questions?
Would we reach out to you, Tom, if we were interested in any of these? I like the upgrading employee skills programs that you're offering there. I think, some people could use a little, when you're short-staffed, you just don't have the time to train everything all the time. It would be helpful to utilize this resource. So is it you that we would reach out to, or?
Absolutely. Right now I'm serving interim, and in addition to all my other roles, is the interim market maker for the Southeast, and that's a position established. The one just recently retired, Joanna Matus, that's meant to work with businesses on grants. So what'll happen is if you look at the PowerPoint when you get it, and you kind of reacquaint yourself with what I've talked about, and if there's any grant that you want to learn anything more about, use me as the first point of contact. There may become a point as we get to the next stage where you'll work with someone else, but I can be the first point to kind of get a sense of where you are, what your needs are, and then connect you to the right individual after that.
Would like HR training be one of those training programs?
Yeah. The Workforce Training Fund has almost anything that you can do. The only thing that the state kind of guards against is they don't want you to they don't want to fund training that you would do anyway.
Right.
One thing they might reject, I'll give you an example. Once I had a company, and because I get all Workforce Training Fund applications, even if they don't, and you don't have to go through me. I mean, companies can apply on their own. And but I see everyone that emanates from this region. And I can remember one company that was a call center, and one of the trainings was how to use their phone system. The Workforce Training Fund the state would say, look, that's something that's a core function of their job. We want you to do kind of a value add to the employee, that would increase their productivity. That would, not the basic core function of the job. But that's really the only thing I've seen them kind of push back against. Generally, the state has been very receptive to all sorts of trainings, as long as you make the case that it's going to increase the productivity of your workers, make your company more competitive in the global economy, and and you can make that case, and we can help you make that case as well in terms, because that's the thing I can do is Again, a company can apply for the Workforce Training Fund purely on their own, but we also are here. The boards can certainly provide you assistance in writing a Workforce Training Fund application. And I would also say that at one time, the WTFP was a very cumbersome, complicated application. It's one of those, in government, we generally do that, right? But it's one of the few things in government I see that over the years, they've listened and made it simpler and simpler and simpler. And it's a pretty easy application to write. The real work is in devising the training plan and describing that, but it's not a bad application.
Yeah. I mean, HR has just grown into so many different areas that it's really gotten so huge that we just need to add to it. So.
Yeah.
If we don't have any more questions, we can wrap up. Tom, thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks,
As
Tom.
always, this stuff this stuff can be very confusing.
Thanks, Tom.
But it can be very helpful.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it. Tom put out his contact info. If you don't have it, just let us know. We'll help connect. And thank you everybody for coming. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Tom.
Rick,
Thanks,
stay
Mike.
on for a sec.
Just